I'm here today to talk about some work that Kentucky has been doing over the past year to understand and address significant educational attainment challenges we face in rural parts of our state. So last fall, our board asked us to pull together a statewide group of stakeholders to review educational issues facing rural Kentucky and propose some strategies to begin to move the needle in counties that perennially had dealt with issues of low educational attainment. The board's request was actually prompted by the proposal by a private college in the far east part of the state to go public as an effort to provide more affordable education in the region. The effort failed, but in doing so, it shone a great spotlight on an issue of educational attainment that we needed to address more directly in the state. I'm not going to try to explain this map, but basically it tells us that the educational attainment issue in rural Kentucky is not just an Appalachian issue. It really bleeds throughout the state, and it's one that we need to pay a great deal of attention to. We all know the issues associated with low educational attainment in regions and communities: higher poverty, poorer health, higher unemployment. And in Kentucky, at least, we are beginning to see a great outmigration of folks in rural regions, which creates disruption to our local economies. This is not just a Kentucky issue. I know other states are dealing with it, but this shows that over the last 40 years, that the gap between urban and rural educational attainment is widening, and it does not seem to be abating. Our friends in West Virginia have been looking at this issue as well, and they've noted that education levels in rural America are about half that in urban America. So anyway, the work group got together. It's been working together for about a year, and it really focused in on 6 policy areas. And the first, not surprisingly, is affordability. In a state like Kentucky that's one of the poorest in the nation, that came to the fore. A lot of concern about students having financial access to post-secondary education. There was a lot of discussion about state financial aid, and in particular developing some state financial aid programs that targeted rural areas specifically to keep students in the region and also keep them there after they graduate to work and live. The second area of concern had to do with college readiness, an issue that we have a problem with across the state, but particularly in rural areas. And again, I'm not going to explain the graph, but believe me, it tells you that educational attainment in rural areas, or not educational attainment, but college readiness is much below that in urban areas. So how are we going to address it? We have to get very aggressive, not just when students come to college, but early in their middle school and high school years. And post-secondary players have to be at the table with K-12 to really move the dial in that area. The third area of focus of the work group was on the connection, or more likely than not, the disconnection between workforce and education. Much of the conversation circled around how do we grow our workforce while at the same time building economic opportunity to keep educated people in the region. There were a lot of recommendations that came out of that, certainly better talking, better planning among the various stakeholders, but also we need to build up our entrepreneurial education, and not just programs, but really weave it throughout the curriculum. The fourth area of concern of the group was what they saw as a lack of meaningful partnerships in many areas of the state between our 2-year and our 4-year institutions. There are some good examples, this University Center of the Mountain, where there's a great deal of collaboration, but in many cases there is a real disconnect, a lack of partnership, even competition for students. So among the recommendations is really to drive a sense of partnership through things like joint enrollment programs, more degree completer programs. Fifth area of concern, Kentucky's adults. This is a concern across the state, particularly in rural areas where adults are often place-bound and they don't have access to a 4-year university right down the road. We have to think more creatively about providing them educational opportunity. The key recommendation there is to put together a new educational entity in Kentucky, a collaborative that focuses on competency-based education, credit for prior learning, all of the things that we know help adults achieve and succeed in post-secondary education. And then finally, one that sort of jumped out at us in a lot of discussion is the lack of internet access in rural areas, and really what a critical issue this is in post-secondary education. We had story after story of kids taking tests in McDonald's parking lots because that's the only place they could get internet access. We have to come together, as a state and as a country to figure this out, because without that, I think we're not going to see the success that we want. So I guess finally, I would just throw this out that, as we talk about our national education agenda and think about the gaps that we deal with, we need to put this urban-rural divide on the agenda as something to attend to. Thank you very much.